Welcome, viewers, to episode 64 of the ForensicWeek.com show, brought to you by Forensic IQ Incorporated. I'm your host, Tom Moriello, CEO of Forensic IQ and professor at the University of Maryland Department of Criminology and Criminal Justice in College Park, Maryland. Tonight, a return guest to ForensicWeek.com, Dr. Kwanda Stevenson from Athens State University, Athens, Alabama. It was episode 38 when we discussed the topic bullying beyond a reasonable doubt. Tonight we will continue that discussion because October is Anti-Bullying Awareness Month, and Dr. Stevenson has with her two police officers involved in not only the issue of bullying, but related activities associated with bullying, such as school security and active shooters, all topics of concern in this country. We also have with us a student from ASU who herself has been a victim of bullying, here to give her perspective of the problem and provide suggestions on how to prevent them from happening to others. Folks, you are watching ForensicWeek.com, a talk show that features real forensic science by real forensic scientists, educators, law enforcement, and legal professionals who find, collect, and examine forensic evidence in the performance of their duties. Broadcast live on your desktop and mobile devices bi-weekly now on Thursday evening, 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on our YouTube channel, www.forensicweek.com. We are a proud member of the Hangout10.com live TV webcast network, which is a series of shows brought to you live using Google+, a social networking service. Producer of this evening's show is forensic sciences graduate student from the George Washington University in Washington, D.C., Laura Pachuki. Laura.
Yes. All right. Thank you, Tom. Hi, everyone, and thank you for watching ForensicWeek.com. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas for future shows, please email us at forensicweek@gmail.com. If you're watching the show live on your desktop or mobile and you would like to ask a question for one of our guests, please leave a comment on YouTube or Google+, and I can bring that up on air to ask for you. You can also tweet us at Forensic Week. If you like this episode, please click the subscribe button on our YouTube channel, ForensicWeek.com. You can also follow us on Facebook by searching the ForensicWeek.com show. All archive shows are available online at ForensicWeek.com 24/7. Please watch and share. Thank you, and back to you, Tom.
Thank you, Laura. Our InRealLife special segment reporter, University of Maryland Department of Criminology and Criminal Justice, PhD student, Whitney Silva. Whitney, thank you for being here again. Whitney is going to be presenting a case, something going on down in Central Texas called Yik Yak bullying. You post online a random anonymous thought for others to read that has caused problems across the country, specifically in Central Texas. So Whitney is going to tell us a little bit about what's going on in Central Texas, and then we're going to have our guest tell us what in the name of goodness is a Yik Yak bullying. Tonight we are honored once again to have with us Dr. Kwanda Stevenson. She is the program director and professor for criminal justice at Athens State University in Athens, Alabama. She is a member of the Alabama's Anti-Bullying Task Force for Northern Alabama, executive director and founder of CAPE, Crime Awareness, Prevention and Education, and TIP, Truancy in Prevention and Prevention. Dr. Stevenson's research concentrates on bullying, high-risk students, intervention and prevention of school violence, juvenile justice, and delinquency. Dr. Stevenson, thank you so much for being with us again this evening and bringing all our guests that we have tonight.
Thank you for having us here. We appreciate the opportunity to provide some awareness in regard to anti-bullying for not only the state of Alabama, but across the United States and hopefully internationally. We appreciate you having us, and we're glad to be here to answer questions. And I'm glad to bring the panel that we have. I think we have a great panel tonight. We have the students' perspective, and we also have some experts as law enforcement officers here from Alabama who are with us tonight. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. And let me introduce them. Lieutenant Prancy Robertson. He is a lieutenant in the Decatur Police Department, Special Operations Division, Office of Homeland Security, assigned to the Community Resource Office Unit, School Resource Officer Unit, SRO. You're going to hear us talking about SRO, and that stands for School Resource Officer. That's that officer who's assigned to your school. Some people, well, I think that's going on around the country. I know here in Maryland we have them too, but I never heard them referred to as SRO, but I learned that this evening. Lieutenant Robinson has been in law enforcement for over 22 years. He is an instructor in courses that certify active shooter response courses for our local law enforcement officers, SWAT, tactical, and emergency management. Lieutenant, thank you very much for coming here. I see you're all dressed up, and we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate allowing me to participate tonight.
We look forward to hearing your perspective this evening. Now we have Stephen Whited. Stephen was a sergeant in the Fort Payne High School Police Department, and he has stepped down as a full-time officer, and he is now a full-time instructor at the Fort Payne High School Career Tech Education Program, and he teaches courses in law, public safety, corrections, and security. And he is still a part-time officer, so he is still certified with the Fort Payne Police Department, and he has been a school resource officer, and he is also a children's author, and he has developed a children's program. He has conducted several research projects on bullying, domestic violence, and other school-related issues in the past 10 years. Steve, it's an honor and pleasure to have you also.
Same here, sir. Thank you.
And our last guest is Raven, a beautiful name. You know, here in Baltimore, the Baltimore Ravens are a very special football team. I don't know if you know that, Raven, but her name is Raven Southwood. She is an Athens State University student. She's a junior, an elementary education major, and a victim of bullying. And she's going to talk to us a little bit about what that meant, what her experience was, so we can get feedback to find out, okay, how does it happen, and how was it dealt with back when she was victimized? How has it changed, and how are we doing better? So, Raven, thank you for coming. I know you're in the middle of the semester and you have a lot of things to do, but it's an honor and pleasure to have you here also.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, now, the first question I want to ask my guests are, why are we discussing the subject of bullying together with active shooters in school security? Sometimes people are confused and kind of separate bullying from more violent acts. So I'm going to start with Dr. Stevenson, and then I'll ask the other guests to chime in.
Well, Tom, when you and I were discussing having a episode on this topic of bullying again for an awareness during the October month of anti-bullying, I thought it was very important to actually focus on a specific topic of bullying this year, and specifically active shooting and security issues, because a lot of times when we talk about bullying in the community and schools with parents and kids and educators, we forget to talk about the actual incidents that occur and some techniques and tips on how we can prevent those issues from occurring. So I wanted us to focus on that and have some experts on the panel with us tonight who can give us some insights on some preventive techniques and some of the issues that are concerning us when it comes to once a bullying issue goes too far, goes wrong, and it becomes violent. What will happen? What are some ways we can prevent it? So I wanted to focus in on those topics tonight.
Great. Lieutenant and Steve, you both are and have been school resource officers. Tell us what your role has been and what your experience has been in reference to bullying, and have you experienced any active shooter incidences in your jurisdictions? Lieutenant, why don't you start, and then we'll go to Steve.
Well, as far as having an incident specifically in our jurisdiction, we've not, Tom, but here in the immediate area in North Alabama, we've had a couple of different incidents over the last I'd say, the last 2 or 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it has really increased our awareness in the state of Alabama since the incident that happened up north there, closer to you, in Sandy Hook. That large-scale incident at the elementary school drew a lot of attention to this issue of active shooter, and more specifically, it happening in our schools. It changed a whole lot about our emphasis, even in the sense of our state legislature here in the state of Alabama became very involved in the sense that whether they should provide more funds for police officers in the schools, should we arm teachers. There was all sorts of discussion that brought up. And while most every police department of any size in the state of Alabama have SROs or dedicated police officers in the schools, it really focused our efforts a lot more about that and how we're doing it. For instance, one thing that the legislature did is just define what is an SRO. I know you mentioned you weren't sure exactly what that was, hadn't heard that term maybe in that specific way. And so the state of Alabama actually defined an SRO in the state of Alabama as a certified police officer working with specialized training, working inside the school setting, which that itself is a new, just really defining what we wanted to do. It's not just a security guard, and not necessarily just even a part-time officer, while we still have some of those, but technically now a certified police officer with specialized training. That we have a state entity here in the state of Alabama, and there's a national organization also that specifically we call TASRO, which is a police officers organization for police officers in the schools. And they've provided detailed specialized training for officers who are going to work in our schools. When
you say specialized training, what do you mean by what type of specialized training?
Well, it's just drilling us down to the point that not just everything that you would think a police officer gets at the police academy to deal with routine calls on the street, but more specialized of what sort of issues are you going to deal with in a school setting, and how to work with the school administrations themselves, and the policies and procedures, and how those translate to a police officer. Obviously, the search and seizure laws, for instance, that we are governed by out here on the streets are different inside the school, or I would say the school administration has some different guidelines and sometimes a lot more leniency in the way that they can operate when it comes to search and seizure on their property there at the school compared to an average police officer out here on the street. I think Steve would agree with that understanding those differences and those nuances and how to work with the administration and those principles is a huge difference for police officers going into school.
Is there a good... I'm sorry, if you don't mind. Is there a good relationship generally, okay? Generally, has there been a good relationship between the police and the administration? Because they're certainly, they have two different mindsets for the same issues. How does that work out?
That's correct. They can have. And that's something I think that standardization even across the country and then here in Alabama is getting us closer to being on the same page with that. What we're wanting to see in Alabama specifically as SROs is to become integrated into the school system itself. Again, that those police officers are not an outside entity that just show up when you have an issue, but they are a part of the individual school and the system itself and become part of everything that the administration at that school is doing, from their the basics of outlining, do we need a perimeter fence? Are we going to have an airlock at the front door? Are we going to put cameras in certain places? And the police officer being involved in all those issues from the onset and the planning stage all the way through the slightest piece of discipline that might be happening on the school campus. And therefore just becoming a part of the culture itself with the students and the teachers and the administration seeing them as a working element in that.
Okay. Steve, you thank you, Lieutenant. Steve, you mentioned that you're no longer a full-time police officer and now you're teaching at the school. Do you still play the role of an SRO? at the school now that you're at Fort Payne High School?
Yes, sir. I do at times when I'm needed. Most of the time now I'm in the classroom with instruction and lesson plans with kids. We have special events that I still get to participate in as a policeman SRO. So I stay connected to the school and to the security part of it and keep a close working relationship with the administration as well.
Are you armed while you're in the school?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are all SROs I'm just throwing this out to anybody who wants to answer it. Are all SROs trained police officers, or are there some in some jurisdictions around the country that are security officers who are non-armed security officers that play that role?
I believe they have a few security agencies that are contracted that may not be armed, but they do have armed and unarmed security in different states.
We actually, in the state of Alabama, in Tuscaloosa, we have some contracted, like he said, that are off-duty officers or people who are trained as security guards in some of the school systems in Tuscaloosa County school system, which is about 3 hours away from here. And then also down south Alabama in Mobile, we've heard that the school board has decided that all SROs assigned at those schools will no longer wear weapons. So they want them to blend in by not wearing their uniform, their full uniform, and they also will not carry guns. And they had a situation that occurred about 2 weeks ago at the school, and they had an active shooter situation where a child brought a gun into the school, and the police officer did not have a weapon to be able to defend himself and protect the other school kids at the school and the teachers. Mm-hmm.
You know, I think you mentioned, either Lieutenant or Steve mentioned the fact that there's talk of arming teachers. Has any jurisdiction around the country, to your knowledge, done that, armed teachers, or allowed that to happen? Anybody?
I have heard of some legislation and even some local jurisdictions that are talking about that, Tom. There was even one jurisdiction here in North Alabama who is considering allowing that. But in Alabama, we have a pretty liberal policy or a law, if you will, in the sense we're an open carry state, and then we have a concealed weapons permit that you can. It's pretty simple to get. Basically, any of the county sheriffs can issue you a concealed weapons permit if you pass a very simple background check, which is really just a criminal history, make sure you don't have a felony or domestic violence prior conviction. And therefore, what this jurisdiction is proposing to do is to allow any teacher who could normally carry a concealed weapon to allow them basically to carry them on campus. There obviously, as you can imagine, a lot of debate about whether that's a good thing or not. Again, and this would be my thoughts are, and that our kids are our most valuable resource that we have out there, and we spend a lot of money to protect lots of other resources across the country and in different settings. I just feel like that that in any jurisdiction that we should be as professional as possible in the security of our children. And I think the best way to do that is to have certified, trained police officers that are in our school settings. Anytime you take a step down from that, and this is not to be derogatory toward them, but a lot of times there's lots of factors in it, whether it be funding or a number of different issues. But anytime you go to part-time officers, or you go to retired officers, or you go to a contract security program, or unarmed officers, each time you take a step away from us being at a professional level of protecting our children. And so I just believe that we should, in any jurisdiction, the goal should be to provide the best security possible for that particular jurisdiction that they can afford and that they can adequately supply with the personnel that they have available.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to ask the question of the three of you. I just want a yes or no. Do you think teachers should be allowed to carry a weapon? Lieutenant, yes or no?
No, I do not support teachers carrying a weapon.
Okay, I got to know the. I'm
Say
sorry. Go
what?
ahead.
Oh, I said I do not support teachers wearing carrying a weapon into the classroom. I do support teachers being trained in maybe some combat or some security training in regard to how to subdue a perpetrator in that manner, and some techniques that I hope that the officers are going to talk to us about today that I've had some training on in regard to how to lock doors or barricade or fight the intruder. But I do not think that the teacher should become the bad teacher, as we have seen on several television shows recently, or the bad judge type shows where they are showing a visible gun while you're up trying to teach English and math and history. I don't think that is going to be a good relationship between the teacher and the child. But one other option I would suggest is maybe a place where the gun is locked and stored that the teacher may can go to if the police officer is not in that section or that area if something happens, and maybe train them only if they have those credentials that Lieutenant just mentioned a few minutes ago, where they don't have a record and they've gone to the range and practice and all of that. But otherwise, I don't see us allowing teachers to carry weapons at this time in the classroom.
Okay, thank you. All right, Steve, I'm going to let you off the hook. I think we've hit that. Okay. Are active shooters people who've been victimized in bullying, or are they people who have bullied in the past? People who have engaged in active shooting incidences. Steve, you want to hit that?
I think you could find cases where they've been played both roles. They have been the aggressor in situations, and they may have been the person that had been bullied at some point. So I think you'll find different different cases where you look at the background and you'll see that they've been one or the other.
Is there some better way that the school administrations and SROs can prevent these things from happening by better identifying these people having the potential to engage in violent acts? Because many times when these things occur around the country, media starts interviewing people. I'm not surprised. He did this, or he was always this way. He always used to say that. And of course, the media doesn't go any further to find out what was done. So what happens when you identify somebody whose behavior is going towards that direction of concern?
I'd say the first thing is not to have a knee-jerk reaction and call all the troops in at one time. I think monitoring the student, speaking to the other teachers, see what they've heard in the classroom, try to identify kids that may have also heard things. What you find in the past is they may have written things. Social media is an outlet for them. If they lose the ability to cope with some of these issues, they're going to find a way to act out, to get their frustrations out. So they may have excited utterances in classroom or confrontations with people. So you probably need to ask questions, get out, investigate a little bit, talk to other people, and see what all you can find out. Of course, documentation. If it does look like there's a point that you need to intervene, you need to have something where you've documented those different cases that's happened.
Do your local prosecutors, I don't know if you have district attorneys or state's attorneys, prosecutors, I would assume that they somehow engage in determining how much power or how much authority or responsibility you have when it comes to maybe looking at social media text that's being done. We're going to talk about that in a little while in reference to Yik Yak bullying. But are you able to observe or monitor any social media being done by potential violent students that are contemplating violent acts?
If Definitely, if they got a social media account that is open, it's public, and they're putting things out there that anybody could see, other students screenshot it, parents screenshot it, they send it to you, then I say you've got a legitimate concern to look at it, and if you need to present that to the district attorney's office, I would think that's a good way to go with that information.
Okay, thank you. Let's turn the table a little bit and ask Raven to tell us a little bit about her experience as a victim. Tell us, what was this long-term activity? Was it an individual incident? Tell us a little bit of what it was, and then we'll talk about what was done about it.
Okay. First of all, when it started, it was definitely caught me off guard. It caught me off guard. I was walking through the hallway. I found a note in the middle of the hallway, so I was thinking, I'm going to throw it away. But something kept telling me, open the note, open the note. And I don't normally open notes up on, but I did that day, and it happened to be about me. There were a group of students that I went to school with, and they were threatening to jump me and to hurt me and do all of these horrible things to me.
How old were you at the time?
I was 13.
13.
And I was 13 years old, and one of the teachers that I was with, I saw her in the hallway, and she said, "Hey, Raven, what are you doing?" I said, well, I was headed to the bathroom, but I found this note. I said, how about you check it out and look at it? And she was like, okay. So she read it, and she was like, oh, my goodness. And she immediately called the principal. She called my mom as well. Of course, administration got involved. My parents got involved, and then their parents had got involved. I had been escorted to class by the teacher when everyone else had transitioned to their next class. Some of the things that I went through with it was, I wasn't eating. I didn't want to go out anywhere in public. My hair started falling out. I was stressed out. I couldn't focus. I was nervous all the time, paranoid, just didn't know what was going to happen to me. The principal and the teachers were very, very good at, keeping it down, keeping all the comments and the questions down. But the students who are bullying me, they did get in trouble. And they said, if you look at her, if you touch her, if she feels threatened in any form or fashion, you will get in trouble. But of course, the parents of those students, they defended them. And they were upset as well. I couldn't ride the bus anymore for some weeks until it all just kind of blew over. So that was pretty much the extent of my bullying situation.
What was the how long did this last, and what was the result? Did it stop? Did you end up being friends with these people, or what?
This went on for about a month. I didn't ride the bus. My parents took me to school all the time. It did stop. We never, made contact with any of the students who were involved. We never spoke about it because we just knew that, other people would get involved who didn't need to be involved, and it was just another situation that we just didn't need to bring up.
Okay. Dr. Stevenson, how prevalent is an example like Raven's? Does that happen a lot in schools, and how quickly today are they being attempted to be resolved?
Unfortunately, it is too often an occurrence in our schools. I read a study last week that said that about 90% of the kids that come through our school systems, our public school systems in the United States, will experience either being a bully or being bullied. So either end of the spectrum, they will have some contact or interaction with bullying. Then when you look at social media in regard to cyberbullying, we say anywhere from 30 to 40%, if not more, of the kids that we know of from studies and research we've done are participating in bullying. So unfortunately, it's too prevalent. And as I mentioned in the episode that I did last year with you all, I was bullied for an extensive, long period of time during school. So it's good to hear from my age group, in Raven's age group, that within that time period, just that span, that the response is much better from teachers and principals. And I think that's what you're going to hear from most people today. They're taking it very seriously. I'm sure that Stephen and Lieutenant Robertson would agree that whenever a child makes a verbal threat or is written, whatever type of threat or comment that they're making, whether it's at the school, on the school ground, or at home and in the community, it's taken very seriously these days, because we cannot allow a situation to escalate to the point that we have across the United States, where kids are fearing coming to school, or feel like the only way that they can resolve the issue is by becoming a active shooter and taking the revenge or lashing out on the persons with violence. So it's very prevalent, and I think that we are more proactive and we're trying to be more preventive right now in our actions in regard to police officers, teachers, educators, and people in the community.
When a bullying incident is reported, who has jurisdiction to deal with it first? The administration, or if the school has an SRO, does the SRO have jurisdiction over the administration to deal with it, or is it a partnership?
I'd say it's a partnership. Most time the administration will know about it before the SRO, unless the student comes to the SRO. If the SRO is the one that gets the initial report, you need to involve the school administration as soon as you can. So I'm saying it's a good partnership, and when you've got the trust of the two, I think it's a better situation when you have both sides working together to help the student.
Okay, very good. I'm going to take a little break for right now and call upon Whitney Silva. But when we come back, what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about the kinds of training that we're giving school administrators. Are there required training? Is there certification programs for teachers? We've talked a little bit about certification programs for SROs out there. But I'd like to know, because the teacher is at the first line. I mean, the teachers in the classroom, they would probably see something even before the SRO. So we'll talk a little bit about what kind of training they're getting, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the more violent acts of active shooters in what the government is doing about that, Homeland Security, etc. Okay, Whitney, tell us about Yik Yak bullying in real life.
Hi, Tom. Well, Yik Yak is a new app that is getting a lot of controversy because students, well, anyone who uses it, they're able to post anonymous comments about people who are in the vicinity. So let's say I'm at, I don't know, Walmart, and I noticed that there's a young lady 20 yards from me or so who has a nice top on. I can go on Yik Yak and say, hey, cool top. And if she has the same app, she can say, thank you. Now, that's okay, but the problem is a lot of these students are using Yik Yak to bully kids in schools. And at least the district in Texas that the article we just posted is featured in, they've gone through great lengths to ban this app from their campuses. And also the app itself has tried to ban its services from about 85% of school districts. So they use a technology called geofencing to make sure that if you're on a middle school or high school campus, you can't log in to Yik Yak. Now the concern is for the other 15% of schools who still have access to this app. And my question for the experts tonight is, you know, what can we do? As technology develops, it gets harder and harder to control crime, period. And bullying is an even more interesting case because these kids, for some reason, seem to take a lot of pride in making fun of each other. So, Kwanda, I guess, if you could answer first, what do you think we can do to kind of beef up our approach to bullying?
Well, one thing that I always teach when I go into the school system and talk to the kids and the administrators, you'll be surprised that, to me, the best resource is the student, it's the child. When I go and I talk to them over the past couple of months, when I've gone into the school systems, I always ask them, what type of social medias do you all use? And I make a list of them because they're the ones who are using them. And as the new software comes out or new mediums come out, they're the ones who are using them. I'm not in that age group, so I don't keep up with all the new mediums. It might be a year or two before I use them. So I would say always listen to them. As a parent, you should always ask your kids what apps you're on, what are you using, look at them, monitor them, the school systems as well. Most of the school systems now are very good with monitoring a lot of the apps. You're talking about this app, Yik Yak, and we have this situation in Alabama as well. The kids are mostly using Yik Yak, and what they say to me is by the time we get to a social medium that they were using, then they don't want to be on it anymore. They want to go somewhere where it's private, where they can continue their taunts and harassments and bullying. So once we move to using a certain software or app, they don't want to use it. And Yik Yak was one of the ones that they mentioned that they do use. And here in Alabama, we're actually monitoring Yik Yak in several of the school districts. And like you mentioned, geofencing and other technologies that they can use to filter and monitor. A lot of teachers are asked to be online. A lot of principals, some of the SROs are asked to be online. So if they notice and hear some of the comments made, then they can report them and they can handle those situations.
Now, how are you all punishing students who are taking advantage of this app to bully others? Now, what would be an example of a minimum punishment?
Well, in our system, for instance, we have an alternative. The first step is, of course, when you have a suspension of some type, and it depends on the exact nature of the threat or the level of bullying you're talking about. And I think it's very important for us to look at each individual case. It's very hard when you got to be careful about setting such a generic policy that anybody who's caught on this or makes a vague threat is automatically 3 days in what we call case. It's an alternative place. It's basically a suspension. You're out of the normal school system for X number of days, and that varies depending on the I guess the level of threat that we consider it. What I mean by that is each time, and I know Steve was mentioning a moment ago that whether the SRO receives a threat or the school administration does, we immediately get together. The third element that we use in that are the counselors that are at our schools. And we do what we call a triad approach, where that each one of us, from the law enforcement, from the administrative, and from the counselor's perspective, we each do a threat assessment. And we have a set of criteria that we go through to evaluate that particular incident. And each of us then make a recommendation of whether this incident was low, medium, or high threat, and then make that recommendation as a group to the superintendent about the level of punishment that would be done to that particular student. Does that explain that to you?
Yes, it sounds like you guys are doing a great job. All right, thanks so much. And Tom, back to you.
Thank you. How prevalent, again, as Whitney just said, it looks like you've really got it together and you got a process in place in your jurisdiction.
Yes, sir.
How prevalent is that process throughout the country? Are these isolated, or are we going? Is the country going in the right direction to deal with it in the manner you're doing?
I think we are. I believe Steve would agree with this, that every jurisdiction is a little bit different on this stuff, and everyone has a different approach. Some are a lot more detailed, as ours are proactive, if you will. I think that's where that some of the state and the federal government getting involved in this can be a help to us in the sense of standardization. From our training that we're putting out to teachers and to parents, to students, as well as how our officers are dealing with these things. Because as you know, students don't just stay in one jurisdiction either. And what we have happen a lot of times that in our jurisdiction may end up suspending or expelling a child from our jurisdiction for problems that we consider very serious, and they simply move to the next city over. And so there's got to be more standardization between jurisdictions even about how we handle this, because we don't want to expel a young man that ends up over at Steve's school jurisdiction that they begin to have the exact same problems with, because a lot of these things are progressional or repetitive. And when you begin to see these indicators or signs there, other jurisdictions need to know that. And of course, there's a lot of sensitivity there when we're talking about juveniles and their privacy rights and so forth about that. And so we have to do some better standardization, I think, across jurisdictional lines, and that's going to have to be done even at a legislative level, probably.
Well, every time we have a shooting in a school, the president gets on there and indicates that, you know, we have to do something about this, we have to take a stand, we have to take responsibility, and all those things. So what has the federal government done to take the responsibility of creating standards, looking at who's doing it well, and in creating standards with those experiences and bringing it across? Because there's plenty of jurisdictions in the smaller areas of the country that are probably doing nothing.
You're right. And that's where they can be the biggest help to us. Is I think at this point is from a federal level, and we're starting to do it on our own at different state levels, is finding out those best practices, what works, what doesn't, and then begin to put that in a format that we can easily begin to delegate out to the different jurisdictions. And so that's where at the moment they can be the best help to us, I think.
Well, Tom, I also want to add the fact that the reason that the president comes on, or his administration comes on and said that we need to do something, is because typically the federal government is the last one to get involved. They would like for it to be more on a local and state level, and it has to be because of the laws and the way the policies are created. So the federal government, in regard to the Department of Education, Department of Justice, I've gone to several trainings and conferences with them. They are trying to get some best practices and case studies and talk to everyone. But the one thing that I see that they have incorporated is the fact that they can charge or use as a policy or the law in regard to civil rights of a child. And so according to the 14th Amendment with the civil rights, meaning that if it's a violation of someone's civil right in regard to their gender, their age, their sexual orientation, or anything of that nature, and they threat, harass, or intimidate, or even attack someone, then they can be charged federally to try to send a message that these acts are not tolerated. But so many times, unfortunately, when you see these violent acts occur, the attacker, the aggressor, takes their own life. So you don't really see that punishment a lot of times as you would with other crimes. So it seems like the federal government is not really taking a stance or not helping. One thing I would like for the federal government to do is, as we've mentioned before, all of us, is to maybe give more money and funding in regard to federal grants for SROs and bullying.
Absolutely, federal grants, and they can have the heavy hand in that sense. If you give a jurisdiction money, a federal grant, say, look, we're going to give you money to do this, they'll engage. They'll engage. You got to decide what's important, and that's the benefit of the federal government. So I agree with you 100%. It's about providing funds and some guidance, and certainly they have resources that state and locals may not have. And what if technology went away? If handheld telephones and the internet wasn't there, would the kinds of bullying we see today would that go away, or would it manifest itself in another way? Just imagine a world with no phones and no internet and no iPads.
I think it would go back to the typical playground bullying, more physical things in the hallway, bathroom, even take the form of writing the notes and passing it in classroom. I think that you're always going to have that element in society and in schools.
But I guess, is there more bullying activities because it's easier with technology? Is that part of the reason for the increased perceptions of the acts?
I'm going to say so. I spoke with the students in our Principles of Public Safety class. We've kind of been on that topic a little bit since it is October, getting into the awareness programs, and just asking them what some of the issues with bullying are. They say it's more prevalent with social media and people that otherwise wouldn't say anything to you in the hallway, they go home and they get courage behind a computer and they say all sorts of nasty things, posting pictures and things like that. So the students even say it's more of an issue with with social media.
Okay.
Yeah, Tom, we're actually calling it the coward in regard to social media. A lot of kids are using social media and they're acting as a coward. They want to bully someone and intimidate them and gain control and power, but yet they want to hide their hand. And it's easier for them to hide their hand with social media. So if social media, I agree with Stephen, if social media did not exist, it would go back to 30, 40 years ago, the way the schoolyard bully concept was, and it would just end at school. Now, because of social media, it never ends. It's 24 hours. It's on the weekends. It's at night. It's a continuous process, and I think that's what has actually increased bullying in our society. And plus, social media, period, shows more examples. Today, our kids are influenced by whatever they see and hear the most. So when they see other acts that kids get away with and view them on YouTube or other clips or hear about it, then they say, oh, I can do that, or I'm going to take it to the next level, and I'm going to escalate it. I'm going to do more. I'm going to do more of this. And so I think it has caused even more problems, and it's causing more problems to prevent it as well.
It is absolutely an educational thing too, Tom, for us to start really making sure that this social media thing has come on so fast, even to our school kids. To be frank, in the last 10 years, I mean, it's amazing the change, and a lot of them do not realize I think there's a lack of knowledge really about how much damage you're doing when you put out a negative post. Just like the young ladies Raven talking about picking up the note in the school hall. But imagine the impact to her when that note is on some type of social media that she knows 99% of the school just saw, maybe before she saw it. And the impact that has on her, those feelings that she had that may have taken weeks to build, are almost instant. And so we've learned that especially social media type things and like these Yik Yak type conversations, that we go after those very aggressively. The second that we see something like that, we have to make sure that we differentiate here between who's the victim and who's the bully, and make sure that the punishment is divvied out as it should be. Just be aggressive about that, because if there was a delay with that note she found in the hall, there is no delay with social media. And we have to get on those issues very quickly. And so that's something that we as law enforcement and the school administrators have figured out that we have to take very seriously very early on, and we've got to educate the kids about the impact of these issues on their lives, as well as their parents.
Thank you. I don't want to use the word simple bullying, but acts similar to what Raven mentioned, if they're left untouched, do they tend to escalate to become more violent if the school and the administration is not getting involved?
Well, certainly, I believe it's like any other confrontation. If there's not some type of mitigation, the sooner the better. It has great potential to lead to something greater. Something as simple as one student keying another student's car and breaking a taillight, some type of criminal mischief, tells you that student, if he's willing to do that or she's willing to do that type of thing, that the next step could be violence. And so even those things that may not necessarily be, a lot of times the parents say, well, they just did this. But we have seen that those things are escalations. And so as early on as we can detect some type of harassment or some type of anything that's going to create issues down the road, we aggressively pursue those. And I think Steve would agree with that we try to watch for those indicators and aggressively pursue them as a unified force.
I'm going to say, like with Raven's case, somebody doesn't get placed or get checked, and they're allowed to continue that. I feel like they get a little bit of empowerment over the person they're harassing, and you'll see an increase in aggressiveness and what they're willing to do to harass or bully a person. So I think you have to have some checks and balances in there, and you have to have teachers, administration, other students as well as SROs being vigilant to the fact that that happens.
It's like children, you know, if you don't tell them what they're doing is wrong, they just assume it's normative behavior and it's okay, and it just continues.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
And then
Absolutely.
also you just have to, with a bully, you have to deal with the fact of what their home life is like. You have to take into consideration where they come from, what they deal with on a daily basis. Some things I've seen are when students have older siblings or they are actually being bullied at school. And they may not know how to handle that. So they pass on what's been passed on to them, and they do exactly what they do to the next person, and they become a victim. And you have to take all of those things into consideration. And not all times, it is bad. It is bad. But one thing I know, I told Dr. Stevenson one day, I said, you have to check the home life. You never know where they're coming from. So you have to question both sides.
Raven, were you satisfied with the way your case was handled? Do you think it was done quick enough? Do you have any recommendations of something different, or were you satisfied?
I was definitely satisfied. The principals, the parents, the teachers, they acted promptly. They got the situation handled, and we moved forward. Of course, the big thing was, even though that happened, word spread. Of course, when I said something and I spoke out about, what was being said and what was being done, the word got around. And, the students started asking me questions, and people were texting and calling, and then you're having to say, not going to talk about it, not going to talk about it, we're just going to leave it alone, we're going to move forward. And that's hard to do, because sometimes I feel like when I actually talk about certain things, that's a healing process for me. And not all times are you able to talk about those certain things and those aspects. But I do feel like everything was handled promptly. And one thing I do suggest, for parents, is to actually watch your children, watch the behaviors they present. When they start to back off, I'm talkative, I'm outgoing, and when my parents see me not talking, not being outgoing, not going out, hiding in my room at all times, not talking on the phone, just all my interactions are very, very different. They're not usual. They're not normal. You have to definitely check out what your child is going through. You ask questions, you get in their business, and I think a lot of, my upbringing, or my parents were very, very nosy. They were checking phone bills, phone numbers, talking to all of my friends, talking to parents, asking teachers, and they were emailing teachers all day long. How's Raven doing today? Is her behavior, any different? Has anything changed, or any, normalcy, anything that we need to worry about, discuss? So everything was handled, and I take that with me all the time. I'm a very nosy person. Too many things, too many incidents, too many violent situations have happened, and being a human, you have to get in people's business. You have to know where they're coming from. You have to get in there, because sometimes you want people to ask you questions. Is there something wrong?
And you mentioned about engaging parents. I would like to ask Dr. Stevenson. As a parent myself, we always, there's no book on how to be the best parent in the world, and so I know there's going to be parents listening to this show, because I already have had feedback from people before the show even started, and said, hey, we're gonna suggest that our parents of our school watch this show. What would you, based on your experience and knowledge and research, say to a group of parents in reference to watching these things, and what should they be telling their own children? What should they be watching for, both not only for bullying, but the more dangerous, more violent acts that are being experienced in schools throughout the country?
Well, some of the things Raven just mentioned, some of those indicators. If a child's behavior is changing, then that's certainly a time to take note to those changes and reasons why they're changing. She gave you some perfect examples, textbook actually, of hair coming out, falling out, the child acting agitated all the time. If you come around them and they jumping and looking around and scared, nervous, stressed out, not eating when they once were eating, not want to get on their cell phone when they usually have their cell phone with them all the time, or they looking around when they're on their cell phone. So notice some of those indicators and talk with them. The most important thing for a parent is to be involved. They have to be there. They have to ask their kid. The most important question at the end of the day is, how was school? And not just ask them not to listen to the response, but really ask them some specifics. What did you eat for lunch? Who did you talk to? What good grades you had there? Get involved. So then when something does happen, the kid won't just brush you off when you ask them a question, because they'll think, oh, they just asked me now because they think something wrong. Now it's something wrong and I don't want to talk to them about it. Always be attentive, be involved, interact with the principals, the teachers. I talk to parents all the time about talking to teachers. Teachers notice a lot of things that go on before anybody else in that school system. So if your child's experiencing something, talk to the teacher. That relationship with the teacher might have changed. Or the teacher, honestly, to be honest with you, teachers are in the social working of the school with the kids. They know who's dating whom. They know who's having an argument or a tiff. They know if the two friends are not getting along right now. So talk to those teachers as well, and as the principal and SROs, get to know them. So I would say that as a parent, stay involved, get involved, read literature, try to stay up on the current information regarding social media and find out what's going on with kids and what they're utilizing. Like we talked about Yik Yak as an example. Find out what type of conversations and friends they have. That's very valuable. You need to know what type of... I'm sorry.
My kids are all grown up, so I haven't gone to a PTA meeting in many years. Are the state and national PTA associations supporting this, in engaging in providing training? Because they create a venue to get parents together, and I'm wondering whether they're inviting you and in the SROs to come to their meetings.
Well, actually, not as much as we would like them to, because some schools, unfortunately, still are denying the fact that bullying occurs at their school and not wanting to deal with the issue. But I will say, over the past 5 years, I have seen within the last 2 years more schools inviting me to come in and talk, and not just schools, but Boys and Girls Club, YMCAs. And so Raven and I are actually going to talk to a school, their fall forum they're going to have at the end of this month. And they have invited us to come and talk to their school and talk to the parents and kids as well in regard to being proactive and some indicators and preventive techniques that they can use for bullying.
Great, thank you. I'm looking at the time, and time is getting real short. But Dr. Stevenson, if there's students out there listening and saying, hey, this is an area of study, this is something that I really want to engage in. I want to possibly find a career field that I can make a difference. What should they major in? Where do they go? What are there jobs out there that engage in these type of things that we've been talking about?
Yes, there are no pure, as we would say, pure or traditional majors per se in bullying, focusing on bullying and school violence. So you kind of have to do an interdisciplinary program or major certainly in criminal justice, pre-law, psychology, because psychology has forensics, and they also have training in regard to certain theoretical aspects that we use in regard to schools, and then education. Education now is doing a wonderful job in incorporating classroom management and talking about bullying more so than any of the other fields, along with criminal justice. So I would suggest education in regard to classroom management or education administration, and technology, because cyberbullying is incorporated in educational technology, and in criminal justice, psychology, and sociology. It's another good major as well. And you typically see your law enforcement officers at various levels major in criminal justice or sociology. And you also see your educators, teachers who major in education. And a lot of the education majors at our school, they incorporate criminal justice as maybe a minor so they can get those expertise and those trainings with juvenile justice studies.
You know, I think possibly the lieutenant made it, or Steve mentioned it. There was one career field that we really didn't spend a whole lot of time in, and that's the guidance counselor. So we have the SRO, we have the administration, we have this guidance counselor that I would assume engages in the same way. And I would think that possibly a guidance counselor would be in a perfect environment to engage in this kind of stuff. That might be a good career field for people who want to be involved in this. Would you agree?
Yes, I would agree.
Okay. It's the hour's up, but I do want to ask the lieutenant and Steve, if you're a law enforcement officer out there listening to the show and saying, "Hey, this is something that I'm interested in," is this an assignment for an officer? Can he or she ask to be an SRO? Or do officers, when they get assigned to an SRO, is this something they like doing and not like doing? Can you respond to that?
I think if you have an interest in it, you definitely need to, if you're already working in the field, I think you definitely need to let your chief, department heads know that you have an interest in it. For someone that's planning to get into this career as a younger person, keep your reputation clean, keep your criminal history clean, get your education, get employed, and definitely let them know that you have a interest in it. I think it is a calling. I think you have to want to work with children and be in this setting, because it's totally different than being a street patrol officer. And you have to put many hats on, and you're working with a different group of people than what you're used to. And I think the lieutenant can tell you it's a very different job, but it's also a very rewarding job in many different ways than just solving a case or putting a criminal behind bars. You're actually getting to see kids from kindergarten through 12th grade mature, become responsible adults, and it's a very rewarding job.
Steve, I'm sorry, Lieutenant? Thank you, Steve.
Yes, sir. I completely agree with the things that Steve said there. For most police officers in most police departments, it is a specialized assignment to go to the SRO. And just like if you wanted to be a detective or a narcotics officer, those type things, most of the larger departments especially would candidate folks who apply for it when we have openings in those positions. And it's competitive. Even in our department, I know the last opening that we had for an SRO, we're about 140-man department, not real large, but I had 8 officers that wanted that job and competed very heavily for it with an interview process. And we're seeing more and more interest in it from police officers. As Steve said, we're looking for specific things. So we're looking for guys that, it's a very specialized job. This is just not a place that we want to put our guy that's about to retire next year. We're simply looking for a place to go. We're wanting young, aggressive officers who want to be there and be a part of these kids' lives and be a part of the school system. As Steve said, there's so many aspects of this that some of the guys coming in don't understand. A huge challenge a lot of times is just learning to work with the administration of the school, because the way teachers think and counselors, educators is much different than a street cop thinks.
Right.
And so our perspectives on that have to be balanced, very much so. And so I would encourage anybody who has that desire to get involved in it, educate yourself about it. There's lots of ways. Every place does SRO a little bit different, but learn how they're doing it and prepare yourself with educationally wise and mentally to do that.
Well, I really want to thank you and Dr. Stevenson and Steve for doing what you do and taking on that career. It truly makes a difference. And unfortunately, the media, when they deal with this subject, they deal with the negative things. When you're doing your job well, nothing happens. Nothing happens, and that's what you're looking for. But I think that we've opened up the eyes of our viewers, not only the viewers who watch the show live tonight, but people who are going to watch the show, to give them a better understanding of the role of the SRO, the role that the academic world has done in reference to having someone like Dr. Stevenson who's focusing her attention on research and doing it better. So I want to thank the three of you. In Raven, I want to thank you so much for coming on and telling your story with that big smile. That big smile just makes me feel good at 8 o'clock in the evening. I guess you guys are a different time. You're in a different time.
Yeah, we're an hour behind.
You're an hour behind. Very good. I do want to tell our listeners that our next show is October 16th, and we have another return guest coming, Sandy Enslow, who is a Los Angeles County Sheriff forensic artist. She was on last year, and she's got a couple of interesting cases that she was involved with. She's going to show us the art in how she was able to help resolve it. So that's October 16th. Again, I want to thank our guests, and remember everybody that you've been watching ForensicWeek.com. That's brought to you through the cooperation of the Hangout10.com live TV show network. Please tell your friends about the show, and continue to watch it. And please tell us. Please let us know what new guests you want, what different topics you want, because I think this is important. And in having the honor of people that we've had here this evening has just been great. So I'd like to thank everybody for being there. You all have a good night and safe night. And Laura, end the show for us.